Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she adjusted her position behind the rifle. The San Diego shooting range buzzed with activity on this scorching Tuesday afternoon, but she had learned to block out distractions years ago. And a civilian markswoman who had been shooting competitively since high school, she treated every session like preparation for her next tournament. The target rotated slowly at 300 yards, a standard drill she had performed thousands of times. Her breathing steadied, finger poised over the trigger when she noticed movement in her peripheral vision. A tall man in military fatigues had taken position at the lane beside her. She caught a glimpse of his insignia, Navy Special Operations. Sarah fired her shot, watching through her scope as it landed just outside the 10 ring. Frustrated, she chambered another round. The military guy next to her hadn't fired a single shot yet, just observing. She could feel his eyes on her technique, which made her more nervous than any competition she had ever entered. "You're pulling slightly to the right," came a calm voice from the adjacent lane. "Your grip pressure is uneven." Sarah looked over, meeting the steady gaze of a man who appeared to be in his early 30s. His face was weathered with small scars that spoke of experiences far beyond any shooting range. There was something about his presence that commanded respect without demanding it. "I've been shooting for 15 years, Sarah replied, trying to keep the defensiveness out of her voice. "I think I know my grip." The stranger nodded respectfully. "I'm sure you do. Just an observation from someone who's had to rely on precision in less comfortable circumstances." He gestured toward the target. "Your grouping is tight, but there's a pattern. Mind if I watch your next few shots?" Something in his tone made Sarah pause. This wasn't the usual range know-it-all trying to show off. His suggestion felt genuine, professional. She had competed against military marksmen before and knew they approached shooting differently than civilians. Their training focused on real-world applications where missing meant more than losing points. Sarah nodded and returned to her rifle. She took extra care with her grip, thinking about what he had said. The next shot landed closer to center, though still not perfect. She fired 4, more rounds, each one improving incrementally. "Better," the man said. "You adjusted well. Most people get defensive when someone points out their habits." "Most people don't point it out as politely as you did," Sarah admitted. She set her rifle down and extended her hand. "Sarah Martinez." "Marcus," he replied, shaking her hand with a firm grip. "You compete? State championships last 3 years running." "You?" Marcus smiled slightly. "Different kind of competition." Sarah studied his equipment setup. His rifle was clearly military issue, modified with high-end components she recognized from professional catalogs. Everything about his gear spoke of someone who used these tools for more than sport. The way he handled the weapon, even at rest, showed muscle memory built through intensive training and real experience. "Navy SEAL?" she asked directly. Marcus neither confirmed nor denied, just gave that same slight smile. "Something like that." The conversation might have ended there, but Sarah found herself curious. She had always wondered about the difference between competitive shooting and military applications. Her father, a Vietnam veteran, had taught her to shoot, but never talked about combat marksmanship. "I've always wondered," she said. "How different is it? Shooting for sport versus the real thing?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Everything's different. Distance, conditions, pressure, consequences. In competition, you have time to prepare, perfect conditions, and the worst outcome is a lost trophy." He paused. "In the field, you might have seconds to acquire a target, wind and weather working against you, and people's lives depending on that one shot." Sarah felt a chill despite the heat. She had never thought about shooting in those terms. For her, it had always been about precision, technique, and the satisfaction of improvement. The idea of life and death consequences seemed almost unreal. "Want to see something?" Marcus asked. Without waiting for an answer, he shouldered his rifle and fired 5 shots in rapid succession. Through her spotting scope, Sarah watched all 5 rounds land within an inch of each other at the center of the target. "Show off," she said, but there was admiration in her voice. "That's standard. Marcus replied matter-of-factly. On a good day at this distance, in these conditions, change any variable and it becomes exponentially harder. Sarah looked at her own target, with its respectable but imperfect grouping, and felt both humbled and intrigued. She had always been proud of her shooting ability, but this man operated on a completely different level. More than that, he did it with a casualness that suggested such precision was simply expected, not exceptional. I should get back to practice, she said, suddenly self-conscious about her technique. Actually, Marcus said, would you mind if I made a suggestion? Not about your shooting, but about your target selection. Sarah looked at the rotating target she had been using, the same one she always chose for practice. What about it? It's predictable. The rotation speed is constant. The pattern never changes. You've adapted your timing to match it perfectly. Marcus pointed to a different target system at the far end of the range. That one over there has variable speed and irregular patterns, more like real-world scenarios. Sarah had noticed that target system but had always avoided it. It seemed unnecessarily complicated for her training routine. She preferred consistency, the ability to measure improvement through repeated identical conditions. I train for competition, she explained. Consistency is what matters. Fair enough, Marcus said. But if you ever want to push yourself beyond your comfort zone, that target will teach you things about marksmanship that consistent patterns never could. There was something in his tone that made Sarah reconsider. She had been winning state championships, but had she been truly improving, or just perfecting the same limited skill set? The question bothered her more than she expected. As Marcus packed up his equipment with the efficient movements of someone who had done it countless times, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. Wait, she called out. Would you mind showing me how to use that target system just for a few minutes? Marcus turned back, and for the first time his smile seemed genuinely pleased rather than politely professional. I'd be happy to, he said. But fair warning, once you start training for real-world variables, competition shooting will never feel quite the same. The variable target system hummed to life as Marcus input the settings. Sarah watched the target dance unpredictably downrange, sometimes moving fast, sometimes slow, occasionally stopping completely before jerking into motion again. After years of predictable rotation, this chaos looked impossible to hit consistently. The key isn't predicting the movement, Marcus explained, adjusting the scope on her rifle. It's reading the current state and making split-second decisions. Your competition training actually helps here. Your fundamentals are solid, we're just adding complexity. Sarah settled into position, trying to track the erratic target through her scope. Every time she thought she had the timing figured out, the pattern changed. After 10 minutes of missing more shots than she had in months, frustration began creeping in. This is insane, she muttered, lowering her rifle. How is anyone supposed to hit that consistently? By accepting that consistency isn't the goal, Marcus replied. Adaptability is. Watch. He shouldered his rifle and fired 3 shots in quick succession, each one connecting despite the target's irregular movement. I'm not trying to predict where it'll be. I'm reading where it is and adjusting in real time. Sarah studied his technique carefully. Unlike her methodical competition approach, Marcus seemed to work on instinct, his adjustments flowing naturally without apparent calculation. There was something almost meditative about the way he moved with the weapon. Your turn, he said, stepping back. But this time, don't think so much. Trust your fundamentals and react. The next hour pushed Sarah beyond anything she had experienced in competition. Marcus guided her through techniques she had never encountered, shooting at multiple distances without adjusting her scope, engaging targets while changing positions, dealing with simulated stress scenarios. Each exercise revealed gaps in her, training she had never realized existed. In real situations, Marcus explained during a brief rest, you don't get to set up perfectly. You work with what you have where you are, in whatever time you're given. He pointed to her competition rifle with its specialized stock and precision-tuned components. Your equipment is excellent for controlled environments. But what happens when controlled isn't an option? Sarah considered this. Her entire shooting career had been built around eliminating variables, creating perfect conditions for perfect shots. The idea of embracing chaos rather than controlling it challenged everything she thought she knew about marksmanship. "Where did you learn all this?" she asked. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "Places where missing meant your teammates didn't come home. Training is one thing, but you really learn when the stakes are real." He shook his head slightly, returning his focus to the present. "But that's not why we're here. Let's work on your moving target engagement." As the afternoon wore on, Sarah began to understand what Marcus meant about adaptability. Her shots started, connecting more frequently, not because she was predicting the target's movement, but because she was learning to read and react to it. The improvement felt different from competition progress. Less measured, more instinctive. "Better," Marcus said after she managed to hit the moving target 5 times in a row. "You're starting to trust your reflexes instead of overthinking every shot." Sarah felt a strange mix of accomplishment and humility. She was hitting targets she couldn't have imagined engaging that morning, yet she was also acutely aware of how much she didn't know. Competition shooting had made her feel like an expert. This training made her feel like a beginner with potential. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they prepared for the next drill. "Why are you helping me? You could be using this time for your own training." Marcus considered the question. "Because you listened. Most people, when you point out a flaw in their technique, they get defensive or dismissive. You adapted. That tells me something about your character." There was something deeper in his expression, though he didn't elaborate. Sarah sensed this. It wasn't just about marksmanship for him, but she didn't push for more information. "Plus," Marcus added with that slight smile, "it's been a while since I worked with someone who could actually benefit from advanced techniques. Most of the civilians I encounter at ranges are more interested in showing off than learning." They returned to training, but Sarah found herself watching Marcus as much as learning from him. His movements were economical, purposeful. Nothing wasted, everything precise. Even the way he handled ammunition spoke of someone who had learned to value every resource. "One more exercise," Marcus said as the day began cooling. "This one's about decision-making under pressure." He set up multiple targets at varying distances and angles, some stationary, some moving at different speeds. "You have 60 seconds to engage all targets. Priority is your choice, but every missed shot adds 10 seconds to your time. Every successful hit reduces it by 5. Sarah studied the setup, mentally calculating distances and engagement sequences. But as soon as Marcus started the timer, her careful planning evaporated into pure reaction. She moved between targets based on opportunity rather than predetermined order, taking shots as they presented themselves. When the buzzer sounded, she had engaged all targets with only 2 misses. More importantly, she had made decisions without hesitation, trusting her training and instincts in a way that competition had never demanded. "How did that feel?" Marcus asked. "Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time," Sarah admitted. "I've never shot like that before. It was like the rifle became part of me instead of something I was operating." Marcus nodded approvingly. "That's the difference between technical proficiency and operational capability. You have the skills for both. You just needed someone to show you how to access them." As they packed up their equipment, Sarah realized the day had changed something fundamental in her understanding of marksmanship. Competition shooting would always be part of her life, but now she wanted more. She wanted to explore these new capabilities, to see how far this different approach could take her. "Would you be willing to train with me again?" she asked, trying to keep the eagerness out of her voice. "I mean, if you have time. I know you probably have official duties." Marcus paused in securing his rifle case. "I might be able to arrange something, but if we do this, it's not casual range time. It's serious training with serious techniques. Are you sure that's what you want?" Sarah thought about the feeling of that last exercise, the rush of performing beyond what she thought possible. "I'm sure." "Then we'll see how committed you really are," Marcus said. "Next week, same time. Bring different clothes, something you can move in easily. And Sarah?" He turned to look at her directly. Don't practice with the variable targets while I'm gone. I want to see your natural adaptation, not rehearsed responses. As Sarah drove home that evening, her mind raced with everything she had learned. She had always thought of herself as an accomplished marksman, but Marcus had shown her an entirely different dimension of the skill. More than that, he had shown her parts of herself she hadn't known existed. The rifle in her back seat felt different now, heavier with new possibilities and lighter with newfound confidence. She was already counting the days until their next session, wondering what other capabilities Marcus might unlock in her training. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was at the beginning of something important rather than continuing something familiar. Sarah arrived at the range the following Tuesday wearing flexible cargo pants and a moisture-wicking shirt instead of her usual competition attire. She had spent the week resisting the urge to practice with the variable targets, though every session with her regular equipment felt strangely limiting after what Marcus had shown her. Marcus was already there, setting up equipment she hadn't seen before. Along with the rifles, he had arranged what looked like an obstacle course with barriers, platforms at different heights, and props that suggested scenarios beyond simple target shooting. "Good, you followed instructions about not practicing," he said, noticing her confusion at the setup. "Today we add movement and position variation. Real shooting rarely happens from a comfortable bench rest." The first drill involved moving between shooting positions while engaging targets that appeared. At random intervals, Sarah had to transition from standing to prone, around barriers, from elevated positions to ground level, all while maintaining accuracy and speed. Within minutes, she was breathing hard and missing shots she could make easily from a static position. "This is impossible," she gasped after a particularly challenging sequence that required her to climb a platform, engage 3 targets, then drop to a prone position for a long-distance shot. "No, it's just unfamiliar," Marcus corrected. "Your marksmanship skills are still there. You just need to learn how to access them under different conditions." He demonstrated the same sequence, moving fluidly between positions while maintaining consistent accuracy. Physical fitness matters as much as trigger control when you're shooting operationally. Sarah watched how Marcus used his whole body efficiently, never wasting motion, maintaining balance and breath control even while moving quickly. It was like watching a different sport entirely from the static precision of competition shooting. "Show me again, but slower," she requested. "I want to understand the mechanics." Marcus repeated the sequence at half speed, explaining his thought process. "Platform climb, 3 points of contact always, weapon secure, target acquisition, quick scope, trust your zero, don't over-aim. Position transition, move with purpose, establish stability before shooting, breathing control throughout." Sarah attempted the sequence again, this time focusing on Marcus's principles rather than trying to match his speed. Her accuracy improved, immediately though she was still much slower than him. Better. Speed comes with repetition. For now, focus on doing it right rather than doing it fast. Marcus set up a new configuration. Next drill combines movement with target prioritization. You'll have multiple threats at different distances, but limited ammunition. Decision-making becomes as important as marksmanship. The scenario pushed Sarah's thinking in entirely new directions. Instead of simply hitting targets, she had to assess which poses the greatest threat, which she could engage most efficiently, how to manage her ammunition, and when to move to better positions. It was like playing chess while performing precise, physical tasks under time pressure. "In real situations," Marcus explained during a break, "you rarely have perfect information or unlimited resources. You work with what you know. Adapt as circumstances change and make the best decisions possible with incomplete data." Sarah was beginning to understand that Marcus wasn't just teaching her advanced marksmanship techniques. He was teaching her tactical thinking, situational awareness, and decision-making under stress, skills that went far beyond shooting sports. "Can I ask what kind of missions you use these skills on?" she ventured. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, checking the settings on a target system. Counterterrorism mostly. Places where precision mattered because civilians were at risk. Situations where missing wasn't an option because your teammates were counting on Overwatch protection. He looked up at her. But that's not something I talk about in detail. Some experiences stay with the team. Sarah nodded, understanding there were boundaries she shouldn't cross. But his brief explanation gave her new context for the intensity and precision he brought to everything. This wasn't just training for him. These were skills that had kept people alive. The afternoon progressed through increasingly complex scenarios. Marcus introduced elements like simulated equipment failures, limited visibility conditions using tinted safety glasses, and stress inoculation through time pressure and consequence simulation. Each drill revealed new aspects of marksmanship Sarah had never considered. "Why are you really doing this?" Sarah asked during their final break. "I mean, training me so intensively. This goes way beyond casual range advice." Marcus cleaned his rifle methodically before answering. "Because skills like this shouldn't be limited to military personnel. Responsible civilians with the capability and judgment to use advanced marksmanship could make a difference in situations where professionals aren't immediately available." There was something in his tone that suggested personal experience behind that statement, but Sarah didn't press for details. "Plus," Marcus continued, "teaching forces me to maintain my own skills at a different level. Explaining techniques makes me think about them more deeply. It's mutually beneficial." As they packed up their equipment, Marcus handed Sarah a small notebook. "I want you to start keeping a training log, not just what you practiced, but how different conditions affected your performance, what you learned about your capabilities and limitations. Self-awareness is as important as technical skill." Sarah flipped through the empty pages, realizing this represented a commitment to something far more serious than she had initially imagined. "Are you training me for something specific?" "I'm training you to be better than you thought possible," Marcus replied. "What you do with that capability is up to you." Driving home, Sarah felt physically exhausted but mentally energized. The workout had been more intense than many of her gym sessions, but the mental challenge had been even greater. Every decision, every movement, every shot had required conscious thought and adaptation. She opened the notebook that evening and made her first entries, trying to capture not just what she had learned, but how the training was changing her understanding of her own capabilities. The competitive shooting that had defined her for years now felt like just one small aspect of what marksmanship could be. More intriguingly, she was beginning to see applications beyond shooting. The decision-making skills, the ability to perform under pressure, the tactical thinking, these were capabilities that could transfer to many areas of life. Marcus was teaching her more than advanced marksmanship. He was teaching her a different way of approaching challenges. As she prepared for bed, Sarah found herself wondering about Marcus's background, about the experiences that had shaped his approach to training and life. Tomorrow she would research Navy SEAL training methods and operational techniques, trying to understand the foundation behind what he was teaching her. But more than curiosity, she felt gratitude. In just 2 sessions, Marcus had shown her potential she hadn't known existed. Whatever his reasons for investing this time and expertise in her development, she was determined to prove worthy of the opportunity. The notebook lay open beside her bed, its blank pages representing possibilities she was only beginning to understand. Competition shooting had given her precision. Marcus was giving her something far more valuable, the confidence and capability to perform when it truly mattered. 3 weeks into their training routine, Marcus arrived at the range with a different energy. Instead of his usual calm demeanor, there was an urgency that immediately put Sarah on alert. He was checking his phone more frequently and seemed distracted during their equipment setup. "Everything okay?" Sarah asked as they prepared for what she expected would be another progressive training session. "Change of plans today," Marcus said, shouldering a large equipment bag she hadn't seen before. "We're moving to a different location. There's something I want to show you, but it requires more space and privacy than this range provides." They drove in separate cars to a remote area outside the city, where Marcus led her to what appeared to be an abandoned industrial complex. The buildings were surrounded by open ground that extended for several hundred yards in all directions, a natural shooting range with multiple sight lines and varied terrain. "This place is used for specialized training," Marcus explained as they unloaded their equipment. Today, we're going to test everything you've learned under more realistic conditions. Sarah felt a flutter of nerves as she surveyed the setup Marcus was arranging. Instead of simple targets, he was placing human-shaped silhouettes at various distances and positions throughout the complex. Some were partially concealed behind cover, others positioned at challenging angles that would require precise shot placement. The scenario is simple, Marcus briefed her. You're providing overwatch for a team that's clearing these buildings. Your job is to eliminate threats as they appear while avoiding civilian targets. He pointed to differently colored silhouettes mixed among the others. Blue targets are friendlies, red are threats, white are civilians. Engaging the wrong target results in mission failure. Sarah studied the layout, her competitive shooting experience suddenly feeling inadequate for this level of complexity. How will I know when targets appear? They'll be activated remotely as the scenario progresses. You'll need to identify, prioritize, and engage threats while communicating your actions. Marcus handed her a radio headset. I'll be acting as your team leader, calling out situations and requesting support. As Sarah settled into her primary shooting position on an elevated platform overlooking the complex, Marcus's demeanor shifted into something she hadn't seen before. Gone was the patient instructor, replaced by someone clearly accustomed to high-stakes operations. Overwatch, this is ground team, came Marcus's voice through the radio. Beginning building clearance, report status. Overwatch ready, Sarah responded, scanning the area through her scope. Multiple potential positions identified, no immediate threats visible. The next hour pushed Sarah beyond anything their previous training sessions had attempted. Targets appeared and disappeared with realistic timing, requiring split-second identification and engagement decisions. Marcus's radio communications provided context and urgency that transformed simple shooting into something approaching real tactical operations. Overwatch, we have movement in Building 2, third floor eastern window, Marcus called out. Positive identification requested. Sarah swung her rifle toward the indicated position, acquiring the target through her scope. Red silhouette partially concealed but clearly positioned to threaten the ground team's approach route. Confirmed threat, Building 2, third floor east, engaging. Her shot connected center mass and the target dropped out of sight. Target neutralized. Good hit, Overwatch. Continue scanning, we have reports of multiple hostiles in the area. The scenario continued with increasing complexity, multiple simultaneous threats, civilian shields requiring precise shot placement, equipment malfunctions that forced Sarah to adapt her approach, and time-critical situations where hesitation could mean mission failure. During one particularly challenging sequence, Sarah found herself engaging 3 targets in rapid succession, while Marcus's voice provided urgent intelligence updates. Overwatch, sniper position identified in Building 1, rooftop level. He has eyes on our approach route and is preparing to engage. Sarah located the threat and realized it was positioned behind partial cover that left only a minimal target. Area exposed. In competition, she would have taken time to set up the perfect shot. Here, delay meant her team was vulnerable. She controlled her breathing, accounted for the slight crosswind, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was perfect, hitting the small exposed area with precision that surprised even her. Outstanding shot. Overwatch. Threat eliminated. Ground team is clear to advance. As the scenario wound down, Sarah realized she was shaking slightly from the adrenaline. The simulation had felt remarkably real, engaging not just her marksmanship skills but her decision-making, communication, and stress management abilities in ways competition had never approached. How did I do? She asked, as Marcus climbed up to her position. Better than I expected, Marcus replied, reviewing notes he had taken during the exercise. Your target identification was accurate, shot placement was precise, and you maintained good communication throughout. More importantly, you adapted to changing conditions without losing effectiveness. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but Marcus wasn't finished. However, he continued, there were 3 situations where you hesitated too long before engaging. In real operations, that hesitation could be the difference between mission success and casualties. They spent the next hour reviewing the entire scenario, with Marcus explaining his observations and Sarah asking questions about tactics and decision-making. She wished she had understood during the exercise. The debrief was as educational as the training itself, revealing layers of complexity she had missed while focused on immediate tasks. "Why did you put me through this?" Sarah asked as they prepared to leave. "This was way beyond anything we've done before." Marcus was quiet for a moment, seeming to weigh his response carefully. "Because I received orders this morning, I'm being deployed again in 2 weeks." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Deployed where?" "Somewhere that requires the skills we've been practicing," Marcus said simply. "And before I go, I wanted to see if you were ready for the next level of training. Today proved that you are." "Next level?" Marcus handed her a business card with minimal information. Just a name, phone number, and address. "There are other people who can continue your development. Civilians with military backgrounds who provide advanced training for situations where professional help might not be immediately available." Sarah stared at the card, understanding that this represented a crossroads. She could return to competitive shooting, taking what Marcus had taught her as an interesting diversion from her normal routine, or she could pursue this path further, developing capabilities she was only beginning to understand. "What kind of situations are you talking about?" she asked. "The kind where someone with your skills might be the difference between tragedy and survival," Marcus replied. "Active shooter situations, terrorist attacks, natural disasters where law enforcement is overwhelmed. Situations where capable civilians can make a crucial difference if they have the right training and judgment." Sarah looked out over the training complex, thinking about how the day's scenario had pushed her beyond what she thought possible. The idea of using these skills in real situations was both terrifying and compelling. "Would you recommend me to these people?" she asked. "Based on today's performance, yes, but only if you're certain this is what you want. Once you start down this path, you can't unknow what you learn. It changes how you see the world and your responsibilities within it." As they drove back to town, Sarah realized that meeting Marcus at the range that first day had been more than a chance encounter. It had been the beginning of a transformation that would reshape her understanding of her own capabilities and purpose. The business card in her pocket felt heavier than a simple piece of paper. It represented a choice between remaining safely within familiar boundaries or stepping into something that could define the rest of her life. Sarah spent 3 sleepless nights staring at the business card Marcus had given her. She researched everything she could find about civilian tactical training, advanced marksmanship programs, and the role of trained civilians in emergency response. The more she learned, the more she realized how little she had understood about the world Marcus had introduced her to. On Thursday evening, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Sarah, this is David Chen. Marcus gave me your contact information." The voice was calm, professional, with the same underlying confidence she had learned to associate with military personnel. Sarah's pulse quickened as she realized this was likely the person whose card she had been carrying around. "Marcus told you about our training sessions?" she asked. "In detail. He was quite impressed with your aptitude and judgment." "I understand. You're considering advanced civilian preparedness training." Sarah found herself pacing her living room. "I'm interested, but I'm not sure I fully understand what that means. Would you be available to meet this Saturday? There's a facility about an hour north of the city, where I can show you what we do and answer your questions. No commitment, just information." Saturday morning, Sarah drove through winding mountain roads to an address that led to what appeared to be a private security training compound. David Chen met her at the gate, a compact man in his 40s with the same economical movements and alert eyes she had come to recognize in Marcus. "Welcome to Haven Ridge," David said as he led her through the facility. "We provide advanced training for civilians who want to be prepared for situations where they might be the first responders." The compound was impressive, multiple shooting ranges with varying configurations, tactical training houses, medical facilities, and classrooms equipped with simulation technology. But what struck Sarah most was the people. Men and women of various ages, all training with serious focus and obvious competence. "Who are they?" Sarah asked, watching a group practice medical trauma response while another team worked through building clearing exercises. "Teachers, business owners, nurses, mechanics, retirees. David replied. People from all walks of life who decided they wanted to be capable of protecting themselves and others when professional help isn't available or sufficient. They observed several training scenarios, each more complex than what Sarah had experienced with Marcus. Teams coordinating multi-room clearances, individuals making split-second decisions under extreme stress, medical personnel treating simulated casualties under fire. It was like watching a parallel world where ordinary citizens trained for extraordinary circumstances. "This is incredible," Sarah said as they paused to watch a scenario involving an active shooter in a school setting. "But why? Why do civilians need this level of training?" David was quiet for a moment, watching the exercise conclude. "Because the world changed, and most people haven't adapted. Response times for professional help in crisis situations can be minutes or hours. In active threat scenarios, the difference between survival and tragedy often comes down to what capable people on scene can accomplish in those first few minutes." They moved to a classroom where David showed her statistics and case studies that painted a sobering picture of civilian vulnerability in various emergency scenarios. But he also showed her examples of trained civilians who had made crucial differences, stopping attacks, providing medical care, coordinating evacuations, protecting others until professional responders arrived. "The training isn't about creating vigilantes or replacing professional responders," David explained. "It's about developing citizens who can respond effectively to protect life until the professionals take over." Sarah studied photos on the classroom wall, graduation ceremonies, training exercises, but also newspaper clippings about incidents where Haven Ridge graduates had made positive impacts in real emergencies. These weren't fantasies or theoretical scenarios. This was real preparation for real situations. "What would the training involve?" she asked. David outlined a comprehensive program that would build on what Marcus had started. Advanced marksmanship, under stress, tactical medicine, crisis leadership, legal and ethical decision-making, scenario-based training covering everything from natural disasters to terrorist attacks. It was a year-long commitment that would consume most of her free time. "It's not for everyone," David said honestly. "The training is physically and mentally demanding. More than that, it changes how you see the world. You become aware of threats and vulnerabilities most people never notice. You develop a sense of responsibility that can be heavy to carry." Sarah thought about the feeling she had experienced during Marcus's scenarios, the rush of performing beyond her limits, but also the weight of making decisions that could affect lives. "What's the success rate? I mean, how many people complete the program?" "About 60% finish the full certification. The others usually realize early on that it's not what they expected, or that they're not prepared for the commitment required." They spent another hour touring facilities and observing training. Sarah was particularly struck by the medical training section, where civilians practiced trauma care under simulated combat conditions. The idea that she might someday be called upon to provide life-saving medical care had never occurred to her, but it made sense within the broader context of emergency preparedness. As they prepared to leave, David handed her an information packet. "Take time to think about this seriously. Talk it over with family or friends whose judgment you trust. This isn't a decision to make lightly." "Can I ask you something personal?" Sarah said as they walked to the parking area. "What made you decide to pursue this training originally?" David stopped walking and turned to face her. "I was in a shopping mall in Phoenix when a shooter opened fire. I had my concealed carry permit and decent basic training, but when it happened, I realized how unprepared I was for the complexity of the situation. People were panicking. There were civilians in potential crossfire zones, and I had to make decisions I had never trained for." "What did you do?" "I managed to help evacuate about 30 people to safety and provided first aid to 2 casualties until paramedics arrived, but I made mistakes that could have been costly. I realized that good intentions and basic skills weren't enough when lives were at stake." Sarah felt a chill as David continued. "That night, I decided I never wanted to be in a situation again where I had the opportunity to help, but lacked the capability to do it effectively. So I sought out the best training available and eventually started this program to share those capabilities with others." The drive home gave Sarah time to process everything she had seen and heard. The information packet David had given her contained detailed curriculum descriptions, testimonials from graduates, and sobering statistics about emergency response, times and civilian casualties in various crisis scenarios. That evening, Sarah called her father, the Vietnam veteran who had first taught her to shoot. She had always respected his judgment, and his military experience gave him perspective on what David's program represented. "Sounds like serious business," her father said, after she described the facility and training program. "The question is whether you're serious about it. This isn't like your shooting competitions where the worst outcome is losing a trophy." "I know, Dad. That's what makes it both scary and compelling." "Good that you're scared. Shows you understand the responsibility involved." Her father was quiet for a moment. "But I've seen what happens when good people are unprepared for bad situations. If you think you have the commitment and judgment for this kind of training, you have my support." Over the next few days, Sarah found herself paying attention to things she had never noticed before. Emergency exit locations in buildings, the positioning of security personnel at events, the response times of ambulances to accidents she witnessed. David had been right about the training changing how you see the world, even considering it was already altering her awareness. Friday evening, Marcus called unexpectedly. "David told me you visited Haven Ridge," he said. "What did you think?" "Impressive. And intimidating in equal measure," Sarah replied honestly. "I keep going back and forth between feeling like it's exactly what I want to do and wondering if I'm crazy for considering it." "That's normal. I felt the same way before my first deployment. The question isn't whether you're nervous about it. The question is whether you're willing to do the work necessary to be capable when it matters." Sarah realized that Marcus was giving her the same gift he had given her at the range that first day: honest assessment and genuine challenge. "Do you think I should do it?" "I think you have the potential to be exceptional at it," Marcus replied. "But more than that, I think you have the character to use the training responsibly. That combination is rare." After hanging up, Sarah sat in her living room looking at her competition trophies lined up on the mantelpiece. They represented years of dedication and achievement, but they suddenly felt like symbols of a smaller version of herself. The person who had earned those trophies was someone who excelled within safe, controlled parameters. The training at Haven Ridge would develop someone capable of operating effectively when nothing was controlled or safe. Saturday morning, Sarah called David Chen. "I want to apply for the program," she said. "When can I start?" "I'm certain," she said. "I want to be someone who can help when it matters." "Then welcome to Haven Ridge," David replied. "Your first session is Monday at 6 a.m. Come prepared to work harder than you've ever worked before." As Sarah hung up the phone, she felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension that reminded her of her first shooting competition years ago. But this was different. Competition shooting had been about personal achievement and recognition. This training was about service and responsibility. She looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, trying to imagine who she would be a year from now after completing the program. The person looking back at her was still Sarah Martinez, but she was about to become someone with capabilities she couldn't yet fully comprehend. The business card that had sat on her kitchen counter for a week went into her wallet, where it would remind her of the moment she decided to become more than she had ever thought possible. 8 months into the Haven Ridge program, Sarah barely recognized the person she had been before meeting Marcus at the shooting range. The woman who had worried about perfect groupings at predictable distances seemed like a different person entirely. Now she could engage multiple targets while moving through complex terrain, provide trauma medical care under pressure, and make tactical decisions that balanced effectiveness with legal and ethical considerations. The training had been everything David had warned her about, and more. Physical conditioning that pushed her body to limits she hadn't known existed. Scenario training that created stress levels she had never experienced. Academic work covering everything from ballistics and anatomy to crisis psychology and legal precedents. But most challenging had been the constant examination of her own judgment and decision-making under pressure. "Final evaluation starts in 10 minutes, announced Jennifer Walsh, one of the senior instructors. Remember, this isn't just about demonstrating technical skills. We're assessing your ability to make sound decisions under extreme stress while maintaining safety and ethical standards. Sarah checked her equipment one last time, a ritual that had become second nature. Unlike her early days with Marcus when she had focused solely on her rifle, she now carried medical supplies, communication gear, and tools for various contingencies. The weight felt natural now, part of being prepared rather than a burden. The final scenario was designed to test everything the program had taught. An active shooter situation in a multi-story office building with civilians, multiple threats, limited information, and the requirement to coordinate with simulated law enforcement while protecting innocent people. It was the most complex scenario Haven Ridge offered, and only students who demonstrated exceptional capability throughout the program were invited to attempt it. "Overwatch, this is Command," came the voice through her radio as Sarah positioned herself in a building across from the target structure. "We have reports of multiple shooters in the Meridian office complex. Your mission is to provide intelligence and precision fire support while our entry teams establish control. Rules of engagement are weapons-free on confirmed threats, but civilian safety is paramount." Through her scope, Sarah surveyed the office building where the scenario was unfolding. She could see figures moving through the windows, some actors playing civilians, others representing threats she would need to identify and prioritize. Unlike the clear distinctions of earlier training, this scenario required her to make identification decisions based on behavior, positioning, and context, rather than obvious visual cues. "Command, Overwatch has eyes on target building. Multiple EO. Individuals visible on floors 2 through 5. Beginning threat assessment." Sarah systematically scanned each floor, cataloging positions and identifying patterns that might indicate threats versus civilians. On the 3rd floor, she spotted movement that immediately caught her attention. Someone moving purposefully through the office space, while others appeared to be hiding or fleeing. "Command, possible threat identified. 3rd floor, northwest quadrant. Individual moving against civilian flow appears to be searching rooms systematically. Copy, Overwatch. Entry Team Alpha is 2 minutes out. Maintain observation and report any imminent threats to civilians." The scenario escalated quickly. Sarah identified and tracked multiple threats while providing real-time intelligence to ground teams. When one of the simulated shooters positioned himself to ambush the entry team, she was cleared to engage and made a precision shot that eliminated the threat without endangering civilians in adjacent areas. "Outstanding shot, Overwatch. Alpha team is cleared to advance." Over the next 40 minutes, Sarah provided Overwatch for multiple entry teams, engaged 6 different threats, coordinated medical evacuation for simulated casualties, and maintained constant communication with command elements. The scenario threw multiple complications at her: equipment malfunctions, friendly fire concerns, changing rules of engagement, and time-critical decisions where hesitation could mean simulated casualties. When the final all clear came through her radio, Sarah was physically and mentally exhausted. The scenario had demanded everything she had learned and pushed her decision-making abilities to their limits. But she had performed flawlessly, eliminating threats while protecting civilians and supporting ground teams with precision and judgment that exceeded even her own expectations. David Chen climbed to her position as she was securing her equipment. "How do you feel about your performance?" "Like I did everything I was trained to do," Sarah replied honestly. "But also like I finally understand why the training was so intensive. In a real situation, there wouldn't be any do-overs for mistakes." "That's the right answer," David said, reviewing his evaluation notes. "You demonstrated technical proficiency, tactical judgment, and ethical decision-making under extreme pressure. More importantly, you showed the kind of calm leadership that could save lives in a real crisis." The graduation ceremony that evening was smaller than Sarah had expected. Of the 24 people who had started the program with her, 15 were completing certification. The others had either struggled with the physical demands, been unable to meet the academic requirements, or realized during scenario training that they weren't prepared for the psychological stress of life-and-death decision-making. As David presented her with the Haven Ridge certification, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a simple comment about her grip pressure at a shooting range, but had evolved into a complete transformation of her capabilities and understanding of her place in the world. "What's next for you?" asked Tom Rodriguez, one of her fellow graduates, as they shared drinks after the ceremony. "I'm not sure," Sarah admitted. "I know I want to use these skills, but I'm still figuring out how that fits into my regular life." The answer came sooner than she expected. 3 weeks after graduation, Sarah was having dinner at a restaurant downtown when she heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire from the street outside. While other patrons dove for cover or froze in panic, Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She moved to a position where she could observe the situation outside while remaining protected. Through the window, she saw a man with a rifle moving between cars in the parking lot, apparently targeting random civilians. 2 people were already down, and others were trapped behind vehicles with no escape route. Sarah called 911 while drawing her concealed carry weapon, providing the dispatcher with precise location information and threat assessment. But police response time would be at least 5 minutes, and the shooter was systematically moving toward a family with young children who had no cover. The decision Marcus had prepared her for months ago crystallized in that moment. She could wait for professional responders while more people were killed, or she could use her training to protect innocent lives. The choice was clear. Moving through the restaurant's rear exit, Sarah positioned herself where she could engage the threat without endangering civilians. Everything she had learned at Haven Ridge, marksmanship under stress, tactical movement, target identification, legal considerations, medical response, came together in the actions of the next 90 seconds. "Police, drop your weapon," she commanded, hoping to end the situation without violence. When the shooter turned toward her with his rifle raised, Sarah's training took over. 2 precise shots center mass stopped the threat permanently, saving the lives of the family and other civilians who had been trapped in his path. By the time police arrived, Sarah had secured the scene, provided first aid to the wounded, and was coordinating with other citizens to maintain safety until paramedics could take over. The responding officers found a situation under control and managed by someone who clearly knew what she was doing. Later that evening, as she gave her statement to detectives, Sarah reflected on how the day's events validated everything she had learned during her transformation from competitive shooter to certified tactical responder. The skills Marcus had introduced her to, and Haven Ridge had developed, had enabled her to save lives when it mattered most. "You did good work today," said Detective Martinez as he concluded the interview. "Your actions saved lives, and your handling of the aftermath made our job much easier." Driving home, Sarah thought about calling Marcus to tell him what had happened, but realized he was somewhere overseas using similar skills in situations she could only imagine. Instead, she called David Chen. "I used the training today," she said simply when he answered. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, but more than that, I'm grateful. Everything we practiced, everything you taught us, it worked exactly as it was supposed to. I was able to help when it mattered." "That's why we do this," David replied, "so that when the moment comes, people like you are ready to stand up and make a difference." As Sarah prepared for bed that night, she looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror and saw someone she recognized but who was fundamentally different from the person who had first met Marcus at the shooting range. The woman looking back at her was someone who had chosen to develop capabilities beyond what most people thought necessary, and who had proven today that those capabilities could mean the difference between tragedy and survival. The competitive shooting trophies still sat on her mantelpiece, but they had been joined by her Haven Ridge certification and a letter of commendation from the police department. More importantly, they had been joined by the knowledge that she had become someone who could protect others when protection was needed most. Marcus had been right that first day when he warned her that training for real-world variables would change how competition shooting felt, but he had given her something far more valuable than improved marksmanship. He had given her the confidence and capability to make a difference when it truly mattered.